All right, let's talk a little bit about set design. So when we're talking about set design and what the set designer does, we're really talking about scenery. So scenery can be, we can have two types of scenery. The first type of scenery is what we're used to seeing. It's called realistic scenery. So what we're doing, what the set designer is doing, is attempting to depict in great detail a very specific time or place. This picture is an excellent example of uh, a portrayal of a specific time and place. We're clearly inside a building. The details of the chandelier and the tables and the windows and how those windows open, the fact that they do open, the slats and the blinds over some of the windows, all of those are elements of realistic scenery. We can also, realistic scenery also goes back to illusionism. Which was established in the 18th century when we started to go with painted scenery. Now, we can also have metaphoric scenery. Now, metaphoric scenery is going to remind you that you're in a theater because you're looking at it and it feels, it could feel like art, it could feel pretty abstract. And it's going to connect to the play's larger themes more than it's going to depict a realistic place. So when we look at this picture, look at all of the detail that is put into that specific scenery. When we're looking at this image, it's really abstract. We're looking at a lot of rectangles, some lines. There is a table, and this is a picture of a play called The Three Sisters by Chekhov. It's a classic, but it was directed by a man named Robert Wilson. And Robert Wilson tends to go more for shapes and abstractions. And this entire play takes place inside of an old house. So we can see how that old house has been abstracted. So it's a lot more conceptual. It's not super literal. Now, when we're thinking about what a set is made up of, there are a number of materials that are pretty standard to theater. So the super basic materials, we're going to have platforms, flats, and draperies. So platforms are often built to create levels, to create height, and they can come in a number of different varieties. So here on the upper left, we see one kind of platform, and here on the right, we see a totally different kind of platform. Now on the right, we're also seeing the back side of flats. So flats are temporary walls that we build in theater to shape the space, to shape the boundaries. And then finally, at the bottom here, we see draperies. Now, draperies are used to mask the backstage area, and by mask, I mean hide. We also end up having draperies on the ceiling of a stage, and those are masking or hiding the lighting instruments, usually. Now, there are more elements to scenic materials. The example that the book gives is the tree in Waiting for Godot, and that's what we're looking at right here. This tree is a major set piece. It's built into the stage. It stays there the entire show, and it's remarkably symbolic. We can also think of lighting as a scenic material. This is, again, one of the examples from the book, and you can see how the upstage area is completely hidden by the smoke and the light on the smoke in that top picture. And then in the bottom picture, you can see how that fog doesn't go away, but it creates this mist and really colors the stage. We also want to think about scrims. Scrims are used a lot in theater, and the thing that I love about scrims is that if you shine light on the front of it, it turns solid. You can't see anything behind it. And that's what you can see in the picture on the left here. You can see how it really looks solid where up at the top where the light is shining on it. But if you shine the light behind the scrim, you can actually reveal action that's happening. So it creates a cinematic effect, which I love. And you can see that happening in the picture on the right. We also are dealing with properties. So props and furniture are either handled by the scenic designer or by the props master. A lot of times theaters don't have a prop master, um, unless there are a ton of props and if there is a very high budget. So everything that you see here, the chair, the gun, the couch, the bushes, those are all those are all props and furniture. The cooler over there. Um, we want them to all live in the same world, right? So this is a post-apocalyptic play that Valencia produced, Mr. Burns, a post-apocalyptic play. And so if there was like a really shiny new book bag that looked clean and pretty, it wouldn't fit in the world because this is like post-zombie apocalypse. But none of this stuff is shiny and new, and so it does fit in the world. It's working together. And then finally, when we're thinking about scenic materials, we're also thinking about stage machinery. So you have, in stage machinery, we're thinking about things that are power driven, although not always. So what we're seeing here is an example of a turntable. Now, what you're seeing is the underside of the turntable. It's not what you usually see. And the very last thing we're going to watch is a video of the turntable from Hamilton. So if you have seen Hamilton, then I think you will enjoy watching a turntable in action. So that's the last thing we're going to see in this video. Enjoy, and I'll talk to you later.
When I read the show, I was struck by the kind of cyclical relationship between Aaron Burr and Hamilton, how they dip in and out and are kind of always rotating around each other's lives. Also, Hamilton was swept off the island by a hurricane. It's a very kind of cinematic presentation. There was a lot of round imagery floating around in my head. It wasn't for several months until after the entire design was created when my associate Rod Lemon and I were actually going back and storyboarding that he reminded me of the turntable idea, and I brought it back to Andy, the choreographer, and Tommy, the director, and they said, if I can find 10 places in the show where we would use a turntable, they would think about it. And so I sat down and kind of drew a bunch of different versions, and they loved it. They took that stuff, they filtered it through their own sensibilities and exploded it and completely infused it into the show.